Hi again, everyone. And how's it been for you so far? Amazing, awesome. Okay, that's my favorite word. Yeah, very different type of women's conference, don't you think? So today, I have a real honor to sit here and talk to Deborah Henry, who is a bit of a goddess, I think. I mean, just look at her. She's just amazing. And I have to say that I do have some Fugee earrings, which I brought to wear, and I totally forgot today. So very sorry, Deborah. I could have been a walking ad for you, but no. Now, Deborah, I read your bio, and like a lot of women, we go through these long journeys. In a way, like the previous speakers have said about finding ourselves, right? And trying to find out where is our place in the world. And you've had quite a journey yourself, going from modeling to beauty pageants, founder of Fugee School, and everything. So can you tell us a bit about the landmarks in your life that spurred you from one phase to another, because those points, we all come to this sort of crossroads, and we could take this road or that road. And how did you make the choices to take the particular roads that you've gone on?
Well, firstly, thank you, Marina, for having me. It's a small conference, but I have to say, and I was sharing this with a lady earlier, you go to many conferences where you see lots of people, and do people really want to be there? That's, we don't know, right? But here, I just feel the energy of all the ladies in the room. Everyone who's here wants to be here. They're engaged, they're interested, and you can feel the energy that everyone is here because I think a common interest of wanting to be more, to give more, to do more. And, I think you guys should give yourselves a round of applause for being here today. We learn so much from each other. So thank you for that question. It's quite a heavy question to think about, actually. Growing up in school, I've always felt like I wanted to do more and to be more. And there was always this urge within me that I was never good enough, or nothing I did was good enough. And it was, what else can I do to contribute? And a big part of me when my grandparents used to live with us, and I would sit down in the afternoons with my grandparents and talk about the world and social justice for some reason. Why could we not prevent World War II from happening? Why couldn't we save millions of Jews from being killed? Or how are these things happening, and why couldn't we do anything? And then you realize that these things happen far away from you, and you get caught up in your own life, and there isn't enough time, and you have your own problems to deal with. And so it was always this nagging feeling within me to be able to to not even impact, just to do something very simple. And so I think when I finished high school, and the part of me that's always been very consistent in my life has been I've always put myself into uncomfortable situations. And I think some of the speakers earlier were talking about this in the sense of do something that you fear. And I see this throughout all my life. From the time I was a teenager, I convinced my parents, and I have an Asian father. My mother's not too bad, but my father was, I convinced my dad to give me a gap year, 1 year outside of school before university to go to London to model. And I was 17 years old. And I said, I'm packing my bags and I'm gonna go there. And I convinced him to let me do it. After that, I had to go to university, of course. But I convinced my parents to let me move to Hong Kong. I moved to Mumbai alone to try out different things, to put myself into different situations. I remember that even diving, I signed up to do this dive with the sharks one year at Aquaria KLCC. And I am petrified of the water. And forget about the sharks and everything in the water. And I signed up for it. And then I remember being there on the day and dressed up in all that gear, getting into this icy cold water. And they're like, okay, go down. And I'm like, what? How? What? How do you even breathe underwater? I'd never done it. And I went down about 1/2 meter, came back up, absolutely petrified. and took a few deep breaths and said, okay, let's do this. And I went down, and there was a massive shark in there in the aquarium, and then all these people are looking at you through the glass going, and you're like, there, and your heart's beating at 1,000,000 beats an hour. But I did it. And so I think the lesson for me was to try new things, to put yourself into uncomfortable situations, and it doesn't have to be big, bold things all the time, but to try new things, to be in new places, to meet new people, and to do different things. And I think that's been the energy that's taken me from modeling at 15 years old. I swore against beauty pageants. Anyone who knew me before I was 20 would never have guessed I would have joined a pageant, because to me they were terrible for women, derogatory. But then I saw the other side. I saw it being an amazing platform, and I've seen how it's transformed and changed so many women's lives. And to do that and to use the platform, I always say the pageant it's not something you win and you go, I've made it, here's my crown. It's really not that. And it's really not about world peace either. It's offering a very young woman a blank canvas, but what she chooses to paint on this blank canvas, that is up to her. And life is all about choices and decisions that we make. All of us, no matter how privileged we are or how marginalized we are, it's choices and decisions we make. And realizing that in my life, I've been blessed with privilege. Most of us here today are all privileged. Blessed with so many privileges to even be a model, to even take part in a beauty pageant, to have the resources and people around me to champion the starting of a social enterprise or the nonprofit, the work that I wanted to do. And realizing that I've had this. I've been able to choose what university to go to. How many other people, millions of other people, don't make these choices in their lives? We make choices every single day to come here, what to have for breakfast, what to do. People, that is a privilege afforded to very few people. And so for me to be able to offer that very simple decision-making choice, that ability to make informed decisions about your life, being able to give that to someone else, to create an environment that allows people to be able to then do that. And that led me very much onwards to what a lot of the work that I do now.
But just out of curiosity, since I'm also an Asian parent, how on earth did you convince your dad to let you go at such a young age?
It must have been my Irish mother. She's got quite a strong hand at home.
So she was supportive.
That, or I think I just tired him out. I went on and on and on and on about it till he pretty much just surrendered and waved the white flag.
Okay, great. I must look out for that when my daughter gets into this. Okay, I know what really got you into the refugee issue was a trip that you took to Lebanon to see the actual refugee camps. Did that really make a difference, or do you think that, would staying home have had the same effect, given that, as Suzanne said, we have 170,000 refugees here? So was that the push factor? Were you already aware, or was that what really opened your eyes and made you think about it?
Yes, so my first encounter with a refugee family actually happened in KL, not too far from where we are today, in 2008. And I visited this Somali family's home to interview them. And I sat in their home, sat with these 4 children who'd come to Malaysia with their grandmother. And
why were you interviewing them?
It was for UNHCR. So it was a small documentary for UNHCR. And we were visiting 4 families. And I remember speaking to these kids, 11, 12, 13 years old. And I could see there was no light in their eyes. And I don't know if any of you have had that experience. You can meet anyone and you can look at them and you just feel that there's nothing there. These were kids who had escaped a very difficult life in Somalia with their grandmother, traveled so far to come to Malaysia. They were alive. They were sitting there in front of me, physically present. But their emotional state, their mental state, there was no light. And that was the point for me. It was a very personal encounter. And I think this was something we were talking about a little bit about last night. It's the shift away from refugees being victims and us looking at them and going, oh, kasian, and poor thing, let's help, versus anyone can be a refugee. Anyone here today, just at a stroke of a luck, something could happen and you could, no matter who you are, could have the label refugee upon your shoulders. And for me, it was, how does this kid's life change? How does this kid in Malaysia get a better life? And so for me, that was very much the beginning and the starting point. But I'd like to read this quote for you by Anthony Bourdain, who's no longer with us. And I think he says it very well. He says, "Travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart. But that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, and on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you. Hopefully, you leave something good behind." And I think he really summed it up in this simple paragraph. And so for me, it's putting myself into someone else's shoes. In anyone you meet in life, it's seeing things through their lens, through their eyes, what they go through, whether it's in our work life, our family life, whether it's in social work. It's being able to be in someone else's shoes. And so for me, the opportunity to go to Lebanon and to visit families of Syrian refugees that have fled Syria and were living in Lebanon was very important for me to see how people live and how hard it is. And I remember this story. We met this family, and the lady was crying, and she said, "Please help me. I don't know where Malaysia is, but I will come to you. I have to leave this place. I cannot believe my country has done this to me." And the brother turned around to the lady and said, "Sister, save your tears, for there will be worse days ahead." And the look of hopelessness. We spoke about this word yesterday, some of us, we said we felt helpless. And the look of hopelessness in someone's eyes, it really solidifies what it means to be a refugee. And I think that's the narrative that we need to perhaps understand a little bit more, what it really means to be someone who nobody wants. You can't stay at home, but nobody else wants you. Where do you go? And so for all of you, I ask you to think of that question today. If today I told you you have to leave your home right now with one bag, what would you put inside the bag? What would you take with you? Memories? Photographs? The outfit, the beautiful Afghan outfit? What would you take with you if you left? And I think that's to understand a little bit more about, if as a country, as a people, for Malaysia, how do we extend a hand to someone? And I think it's so important to move away from charity. This word charity has become almost such a overly used word. We're not here asking for charity and asking for handouts. We're asking for a hand up, a helping hand up, and to give every single person, no matter who you are, a refugee, someone who's stateless, someone who's in Malaysia without a birth certificate, anyone who's marginalized, to give them a hand up, so we can give them open doors to opportunities so they can build lives for themselves. And so that's very much what our organization does. Fugee is about a shared humanity and responsibility. We're all in this together, guys, and I think the haze has showed us a very big lesson that you may not have done it, you may have nothing to do with it, but guess what? Are you suffering?
Yes.
Yes. And so problems, we're all interconnected. One man's problem, one nation's problem can very easily become somebody else's burden. But we can look at it differently, and if we look at it as a shared responsibility, how do we help all of us be successful and thrive? I really think we can do that as a country, and we need to be inclusive.
Right. Actually, the haze should remind us that there is one category of refugee that's growing also, and that's climate refugees. People who are having to run away from home because of natural disasters, climates as well. Deborah keeps referring to yesterday, and I just wanted to say what she means is that last night, we all took the speakers for a very special welcoming dinner, and that was organized with Suzanne Ling earlier of Picha Eats, where she made us, it's a very interesting thing, she made us go through the journey of a refugee, physically go through it. So we were, without giving too much away, kind of being put in boats and made to feel what it's like to be, up on the high seas in very precarious situations, hoping to get somewhere where it's safer. And that's what we went through. So that brings us to the idea of travel And as you said, we are very privileged people, and here we're talking about it in a nice, comfortable place. And when we travel, we're traveling very comfortably, whether it's for leisure or for work. I mean, some people might complain about being herded through airports and on planes, uncomfortable planes, and whatever. But still, it is a privilege because we do it by choice. But refugees travel, as we learned last night, in a very, very different way from ours. Could you tell us a bit about what you've learned about the refugees' journey? I mean, you've mentioned it, but particularly for women and girls, what do they face because of their gender on these journeys, since we're all women here?
This reminds me of this very short documentary we made a few years ago, and it's called A Girl is Half. And it really explores the reality for so many cultures and so many refugees, where the value of a girl's life is less than that of a boy. And it's from coming from their home countries. It's even from the point of deciding who goes on the journey, who's valuable enough to even begin this arduous, difficult journey, to then going there and getting a chance at a second opportunity at life. And we know the horror stories of all the things that happen along the way, the exploitation, the rape, that women are a primary target in so many ways. But then I wanted to bring it back to talking about Malaysia, and especially in our context, in education. We talk about education, that's the hope, that's the future, that's the tool that these kids are going to be able to use to be able to break out of the poverty of cycle, to break out of the shackles that are holding them down, and it's going to give them that chance of a better, more successful life. But what happens if you're not even allowed to go to school? What happens if a parent decides that I need my kids to work and I rather keep my daughter home? She needs to cook food, she needs to clean the house, or let me send one kid to school, let me send a boy. Or where a mother has a son and a daughter, and she has a little bit of money, and who does she spend the money on? The boy, because perhaps he's going to have a higher chance of success and pay it back for the family. And so I think all along the line, girls, every refugees in general, and particularly girls, are pulled out of school. They're kept out of opportunity. And so there's so much to it in changing how people think and breaking mindsets. And how do you really do that? You can't do it overnight. It never happens overnight. And so an example of how we're trying to tackle this challenge is through this project called Project Stand Up. And it's an initiative that was initiated by some of our Fugee School alumni students to keep girls in school. They recognize that if a girl's not in school, then the chances are, it's never going to change. The next generation is going to continue on these very negative stigmas and stereotypes. And so how do we keep girls in school? And it's being inclusive, getting the parents involved, getting the community involved, getting the conversation started. We need to get people involved and start talking about what people are really going through and understanding it, and not just tolerating, but I think really trying to understand what they're going through and trying to work together towards common solutions. There's a phrase that I really like, and it says, to help a child, you have to help the family, and to help the family, you have to help the community. So no matter how focused you want to be, it's always going to be a big community effort in making any change possible. And I think that's really the point.
Actually, that sort of makes me think of, Suzanne earlier was talking about culture and how the refugees bring cultures to a new setting, and they get to preserve their culture, by sharing with other people. But culture encompasses many things. And then some of the culture may not be necessarily positive. Is the refugee experience transformative towards in a better way? In that way, it's sometimes it's hard to think of a bad experience as being transformative, but very often they are. are they bringing, what I'm trying to say is, are they bringing along, cultures that aren't so great, especially for women and girls? But is that experience and their exposure actually to different cultures bringing some transformation?
I think that, yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it really works both ways. We talk about rights and responsibilities. So very often when we talk about any community that is perhaps marginalized, it's always about, their rights are this and their rights are that. And it's true, everyone's rights as a human being should be protected no matter where they are. But it also comes with responsibilities. And that's when we come back to the Malaysian context. It's anybody in this country needs to adhere to a large degree to the general rules of the country, to ways, behaviors, and it requires some form of integration. But the challenge with that is if you have communities that are sidelined and are kept separate and are existing in Malaysia but in little bubbles and pockets, and they are not interacting or having the opportunity to interact with local communities, that's where challenges, I think, arise. So it's so important to engage. And that comes back to the main part. If anyone is left out of the conversation, negative things will happen. So I think that's where there's an opportunity, I think, rather than it being a problem, the opportunity to meet new people, to understand new cultures, new customs, but also for anyone to understand what works in this country. And be able to then make adjustments and to integrate in a positive way. And I think a lot of the youth, I think the refugee youth here are they're growing up in, I always tell them, use your life story as an advantage. Don't look at your life story. I was born in Somalia, then I lived in Saudi, then I moved to Yemen, then I came to Malaysia, and Malaysia, guess what, guys? Malaysia's not home. Malaysia's just a temporary place for me to be before I get resettled to Canada or Australia or America. I have no idea. And so that can make people feel very confused, unstable, and they also forget, who am I actually? I'm from here, but I'm this, but I'm that. It's like an identity crisis. And so I think for us, we have a great opportunity with the refugee youth, the young men and women, to be able to work with them, and they're learning and they're growing and their eyes are opening up and they're seeing the world in through a very different lens. And I always say, use this as your advantage. Tell your story in a positive way. And they recognize education has so many benefits to it and it changes lives. And a quick example is, you can't also shove things down someone's throat if you want to make change. So an example is when a mom who herself is illiterate, never really been educated, when she sees the value of her child, her daughter, going to school, because the daughter has learned English, is a better communicator, and now the mom goes, oh, come with me to the hospital and help me translate, or come with me to the supermarket. And then she sees, there's value in education because I'm feeling it directly. And I think that these are important moments, and then the mom goes, okay, I'm in for this. I'm going to support you 100%. And so there are little successes along the way that really help transform and change the conversation. And outcomes eventually, right?
Right. That's exactly what I wanted to ask you. I mean, can you share some of the success stories that you've come across working particularly at Fugee School?
And I'll share a few, but essentially it's something so many of us here take for granted, and it's seeing children, to say graduate, but seeing anyone do better in life. It's to see a child who never spoke a word of English, couldn't even write his or her name, suddenly be able to stand on this stage and give a 20-minute talk in front of all of you in the most confident way. Like, that's transformative. To see the transformation of souls of people, because you know that they are doing all of this today because of the support they had, because there were people championing them. And I think that is something that is so invaluable that we can never, for all of our lives, we can never underestimate that value. One of my first students, his name is Ahmed. He was the first family that I actually met in 2008. He stayed at Fugee School. He eventually met his birth mother, who he thought was lost or had died. He was sort of repatched with her again. He went back to Somalia. He started his own charity, nonprofit, to help street children. And now he's back in Malaysia, going to a local university here, getting a degree. Wow. So it's an amazing story of, like, he would never, this kid would never at all be where he is today if there wasn't an opportunity to go to school. And to see our students become nurses. And actually, you know what it is? The ability to dream. I think if I get to the heart of it, we all think that an imagination and dreaming is something that we all do. We all have dreams at night and we all imagine, but it's actually not. That's what I realized. I did an activity with a bunch of our students many years ago. I gave them pieces of paper and crayons and I said, can you draw something, just have as an activity? This is before iPads existed. And the pages were blank after 1 hour. And I was like, why can't you draw something on these papers? And they couldn't think of anything. They couldn't express themselves. And so to teach a child or to create an environment for a child that allows a child to think and to dream and to express, that means a child's going to think about, what do I want to be when I grow up? What are my dreams? And that's such a special, it's an imagination you look at Walt Disney, that's the product of having an imagination, Mickey Mouse, and the empire that is Walt Disney today. That's at the very core of it is an imagination. And being able to feed that, to cultivate that in any young child, I think is really, really special. And once you do that, and with opportunity, the world is their oyster.
Right, exactly. I've listening to you, I've just decided to make a note to myself and a note to my team. Next year, we should have a refugee get up and speak. Please note. So, Deborah, you're obviously very passionate about this, probably growing more passionate. It's wonderful I love hearing people with a lot of passion in their voice because, that sort of is so inspiring, and you're still there, you're advocating, you're even teaching yourself still at the school, a little bit, and now you've started Fugee, which is this jewelry company, which is, like Belle said, it's fantastic, it's beautiful. I don't know who does the designs, whether the girls themselves do it. Tell me, in all this time, you've been doing this for 10 years, is the Deborah Henry of 10 years ago and the Deborah Henry now the same? Or are you a different Deborah? Are you a better or worse Deborah? I don't think it's worse. But yeah, what has this all meant to you?
I think I studied political science and economics at university, so I came out very idealistic. And I'm not sure if many of you, when you were much younger, felt the same way. And with this energy and fire to change the world and da-da-da-da-da. And then slowly you realize that, it's a bit harder than I imagined. I think I've become a lot more of a realist, but it doesn't stop me from having big dreams, but starting small. So dream big, start small, take those little steps. And I think so many of the speakers before me, exactly the same thing. I think I feel a lot more determined and committed to it. It is something I think the work I do with social justice, as I like to call it, and it's not charity, but social justice is something that we all benefit from, a world that is, I think, where people have basic needs met and opportunities is a happier world for all of us. And so for me, it's something that I think as time has gone on, I find that this is what works for me. Whenever I try to do something else that's out of this area, it doesn't seem to work out very well. So this is my calling, and doing it in a way that is inclusive and it's sustainable. I think it's very important.
But have you had times when you felt like, really like it's a real setback and it's a difficult mountain to climb, since we've been talking about mountains, or the invisible mountain or whatever?
To be honest, it really has been. I think after a decade, I feel like, am I really having to sit here and convince people that education is important? Like, are we really actually having this conversation? Education is important, it opens doors. And I hear myself saying it, and I'm like, what? 10 years later, we're still having this? I think we all know the value of education, right? We have children, we've all been we're all byproducts of the system, and we want our kids to, we see the value, which is why we spend so much money on our kids. Why are we still sitting here convincing people that every child needs to be in school? And why are we not at a point where now, even in Malaysia, our country, it's still the same. We're lobbying so hard with the government and with so many different sectors to say refugees should be able to work here. Marginalized communities should be able to get jobs. And not charity, we're not doing someone a favor. We're allowing them to participate in our economy, to contribute, to bring value. We saw beautiful stories there. People just want to bring value. And that's what really gets me down. I mean, there are times when I'm like, what is this all for? Because you're not making, it's not progress. You're not seeing change. You're not seeing people actually, with so many examples around us, we're not seeing people actually get it, that we're all so connected that if we don't help each other succeed, we're all going to fail eventually. And maybe it sounds quite doomsday saying this, but I really, really think it is true.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think nobody disagrees that education is important. It's who the education is for. Isn't that the big issue that, these are not for our people and it's for other people. So how do you convince people that we're all in this together? I mean, what benefit is it to our people to educate refugees? I think that is probably the question.
And if you look at us, the world today, we have the resources, we have the technology, we send people to space, we build amazing buildings. Humanity has achieved amazing, amazing feats in all sectors. We have everything it takes to really ensure that a person doesn't die because they didn't have enough clean water, or a person is not deprived, no matter who they are, is not deprived of school. We have it all. The only thing we don't have is the political will or the personal will. It's really the will to be able to make some difficult decisions that are going to take us, that are going to start the ball rolling on the right path. And in terms of, I know we come from a small country and we have a smallish population, and Malaysians also have needs too. Not everyone in Malaysia is living their best life. I think there's so much more that we need to do for people, for fellow Malaysians. But it's also recognizing that where do we draw the line? If we start going down the race and the religion and the gender and the nationality line, we'll never end. It's always going to be, we can't help so-and-so because they aren't this and because they aren't that. And so recognizing that we can all really do well and be successful as a collective. It doesn't have to come at the expense of, if I'm going to do well and succeed, you're going to have to fail. And I think, let's not speak about emotions, right? Let's speak about the facts. And the facts, and we look at countries like Turkey. Turkey hosts one of the largest populations of refugees outside within their country. I think the third largest. A lot of Syrians and Palestinians and many other nationalities. And they have been a great example of success. They've incorporated refugee populations into some cities, and guess what? The economy has grown, they've created more jobs, it's been positive. Of course, there are bumps in the road like anything. There is social understanding different cultures and social inclusion, but they show positive advantages. And so, as individuals, how do we, as Malaysians here today, how do we be like, you know what? It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. You have these rights and we're here to help you. Because guess what? If I was in trouble, I would want someone to help me too. And I really think it's realizing that, today I'm in need, tomorrow you may be in need. And how do we walk the talk, basically, with that? And the thing I observe this, it's a reality, is that we don't really feel the pain until it's staring at us in the face. And so we look at the haze, it's only when it's there we go, oh dear, stop we've got to change how we live, we've got to change our lifestyles. We don't need to wait. Do we need to wait to meet a refugee and have a personal experience with someone to understand their pain or their story before we are mobilized or passionate to do something good about it? And that's something that I think about often.
Thank you so much. I think that's the point that keeps being driven home, that we're all part of the human family, and probably, I think everyone generally does have a good heart. It's just sort of not being so aware of the situation of refugees. So I just want to thank you for coming here today and telling us about your work and all the wonderful things that you've been doing, and to enlighten us really about the refugee situation globally and also here in the world. So thank you so much, Deborah, and please give you a hand for the wonderful Deborah Henry.
Thank you very much, Datin Paduka Marina and Deborah. We have a small token of appreciation for you. Let's give him a round of applause.